So then, the 2026 Japanese Grand Prix, another weekend in which the Mercedes ends up getting the pole, the win, and the fastest lap. In fact, if you look at those three statistics, you'd notice that 8 out of 9 of those already belong to Mercedes, Max getting the fastest lap in Australia. But let's have a bit of a talk about the race itself and some of the storylines that have developed. I think first things first, Antonelli is the full product, isn't he? He's been really competitive over these first couple of weekends, and whilst he does still make mistakes, he's not, world champion level already. I think the best kind of comparison that you could think of between him and George Russell is like the McLaren drivers, with Piastri and Norris, and especially the two of them last season. I would say that Antonelli, despite being only 19 years old and only in his second season of F1, is performing at a similar kind of level with this current car to what we saw Piastri doing in, say, 24 and 25. I'd say that's the kind of thing that we're seeing right now when you look at the young Italian driver. The win today, it was a little bit of luck, right? He realistically should have been about where his teammate ended up, P4. He got a bit lucky with the safety car, which we'll talk about in a moment, and then was just able to pull away after the safety car restart. Like, bearing in mind that you had that safety car that went out, he still wins by 13 seconds after that. It was an impressive run. It's really well done by, again, the teenager, who is now the youngest championship leader in F1 history. Is he the first teenager to lead the World Championship? Either way, almightily impressive feat. But what this weekend proved, perhaps more than anything right now, is that Mercedes is somewhat beatable. It was something that I said in my preview. I said, have a look at what Ferrari do, have a look at what McLaren do. I did also big up the Red Bull powertrains, which we may talk about in a bit. But Ferrari got the jump. McLaren also got the jump today. So it's not just a Mercedes power unit thing. Because look at that start, and look at how the two McLarens got off the line. They managed to get the measure of the Ferraris, who are meant to have the best launch, even though they've got the Mercedes power unit. So when it comes to these tracks where you are more constrained by, well, trickier overtaking opportunities, the sort of ebbs and flows of Sector 1 of Suzuka, yeah, it can create, well, a real interesting event. I mean, I'm just thinking about Q3. How many drivers do we see go purple in that final sector? I think at one point Pierre Gasly didn't he? So yeah, the Mercedes are beatable. Especially since there are likely going to be rule tweaks before Miami, and there was a slight rule tweak going into qualifying this weekend. I will link the next bit about rule tweaks to talk about this ongoing discussion that will happen after Ollie Bearman's crash. What a violent crash he had over at Spoon. He's closing on Colapinto. I've seen some statistics say 30, some say 50 clicks. Colapinto throws a late block. And it was a late block. This is the thing. Is, yeah, there is an element to which it was created by the rule set. But it was a bad block as well. It was a really bad defensive move from Colapinto, which caused Bearman to have to react. Instead of rifling into the back of the Alpine, he goes around 50G impacted, they say, into the wall. We're lucky that he only walked away with some bruises. But yeah, it does present a few different places that we need to discuss. Firstly, is this 50-50 thing feasible right now? Remember, Alpine, whilst not fully optimised because they changed so late doors, have the Mercedes power unit. Haas have the Ferrari, but Alpine have that power unit that's meant to be the fastest in the straight line. It's meant to be the best one. So if they were running out going into Spoon, what's going to happen for the other teams? I think previous generations F1 would have looked harsher on Colapinto's role, similarly to when Eddie Irvine got his race bans in 1994. But I don't know if that's necessarily fair. Yes, I would say that the mistake happened thanks to Colapinto, but at the same time, there's a wider thing to have as well. And this is what F1 really needs to tackle, because we can't keep on going like that. I'm somebody who I would consider myself probably one of the rarer defenders of the new rule set. I think that it can produce good racing, even if it's completely different to the kind of racing that there is before. This was the criticism and concern the drivers had. And I saw somebody say, oh, Verstappen was talking about this 3 years ago. He wouldn't have known what the car would look like then. What I would say is look to maybe testing. But I think the main criticisms popped up around when Lando Norris was saying it in Albert Park. This could have gone much worse, and it could still go much worse. I don't think that having a 50-50 split is an unfair goal to have in the future for F1. But right now it looks like the power unit manufacturers have not found it particularly feasible, at least over a long period. So what do we do in the meantime? Well, I'm going to save that for another video. And since I said I was going to talk about him, Max Verstappen. Rumours are now that he might actually leave F1 at the end of the year, and if he does, fair play to him. I think that he's still a relatively young driver. He's not even 30 yet, and he could go on to do so many amazing things in the world of motorsport. He could do what the likes of Carlo Rompera is trying to do outside of rallying. And I would be here for that. I would be totally here for that. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that it's because he doesn't have the best car. Or one of the best cars. He loved that championship battle last year where he wasn't in the best car for a lot of the season. But, come on. Outside of that, 21, he had the best car most of the year. 22, 23, unequivocally. 24, most of the year, and then the McLaren got better. It does seem a bit strange. It is completely understandable. Look at what Lewis Hamilton was doing the last couple of years with Mercedes, and heck, even last year with Ferrari. If you're somebody who's used to competing up at the front for your entire career, suddenly having to be limited to maybe a top 5 finish, I can imagine that doesn't feel particularly good. But he was, the third best Red Bull in qualifying? He got beaten by Arvid Lindblad. He only beat his former teammate Liam Lawson. And yeah, he was the best Red Bull powertrain driver in the race. He was comfortably clear of Lawson at the end of it. He still lost to former teammate Gasly in the Alpine. And that's not denigrating Max's reputation as a driver. He is one of the most ruthless, relentless, and one of the best drivers on raw pace that we've seen in F1. There's a reason why he can just jump into a GTP at Daytona and have fun. There's a reason why he can jump into a GT3 at the Nürburgring and perform spectacularly. He is one of the best drivers in the world right now. Full stop. But, yeah. If you're not having fun, you're not going to get the most out of yourself or others. And yes, there is more to talk about from this weekend, from the Super Cup crash to about half the grid that I haven't mentioned yet. But as you may be aware, even though over here at CRE, what I do is I talk about a variety of different sporting series, the F1 break is going to be interesting, to say the least. So let's talk about the standings now and where we're at. George Russell, quite fittingly, 63 points. But Andrea Antonelli on 72. Charles Leclerc is on 49. Lewis Hamilton on 41. Lando Norris is up to 5th now on 25 points after this weekend, which means that poor Ollie Bearman has dropped down to 7th thanks to that retirement. Piastri's up to 6th. Gasly is in 8th. Verstappen's in 9th. And Lawson is in 10th. And for the constructors, Haas have now been jumped by McLaren, but they are still 4th in the standings, 2 points clear of Alpine in 5th, who are tied with Red Bull and beat Red Bull on countback. that is wild to think. I made a bunch of preseason predictions, and I also predicted the championship order as part of it. I know I'm going to be doing a video looking at it, and I know it's going to be depressing. I know there are so many things that, after 3 rounds, are basically ruled out. Anyways, folks, that's that for this video. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching and joining. Thank you so much for continued support. And till next time, it's bye-bye for now.